What would you do if one day you woke up and you had a 1950s diner in your basement, or a general store from turn of the century, or a bar from the 1940s? Well, you'd show it to the super collectors, and we'll show them to you next. Hello everybody, welcome to today's edition of the Super Collectors, kind of like the greatest hits of Personal FX, the collectibles show. Now in today's Super Collectors, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to see super collections that are basically businesses that have been recreated in people's homes. Now the very first super collection we're going to see is actually out in Milwaukee, Oregon, that is. It belongs to a gentleman by the name of Brian Anderson. Now he collects Breweriana, that's beer memorabilia. He is actually an expert on beer from, well, the Northwest, and it's pre-Prohibition. J.D. took a look, and this is what he saw.
Now, I understand wrestling matches sparked your interest in Breweriana.
Correct. Actually, back in the late 50s, I used to watch wrestling matches with my dad late in the evening on Friday nights, and they were always advertised by Heidelberg Beer Advertising.
And you would see these guys, right?
There was two guys dressed up in this type of a uniform. They were called the Harmoniers, and they sang songs and advertised Heidelberg Beer Advertising. Years later, my father-in-law, about 1970, gave me this piece of chalk, which had actually the student prints, as he's called, and the Heidelberg Beer Advertising, and it took me back to my days when I used to watch wrestling with my dad.
You have some really interesting pieces, and this, I love the story about this specific beer bottle. Tell us about
Well, John, this is a bottle that the two of them were found actually in the wall of a warehouse up in the Seattle area, or Everett area, I believe, and someone directed me to those. Apparently some guys back in probably the turn of the century were drinking their beer on the job, and then to get rid of the bottle, they just stuck it in the wall and went home.
And you found two of these bottles. They were in pristine condition. And you said that it's hard to find them with these paper labels.
That clean. Those are definitely that clean. We'll see another one in a little bit here, the second one.
And if you look closely, the labels across the seam, which again is really rare.
Really, they didn't really care much or matter much on quality. They were just putting out the beer.
Now tell us about Pacific Beer. You have a great piece over there.
Here's a couple of pieces of mug from that era. Also a piece of reverse on glass. This is an example of that era, or actually pre-1900. It's dated 1892 on the metal piece in behind, but this piece was painted from the back side, the piece of glass was, then there was a metal piece placed in behind it, which is pressed, and it gives it a three-dimensional look, and that's been restored to some degree from when I obtained it. But
boy, and pieces like that in good condition must be real hard to find.
Real tough to find, yeah, they're extremely tough. This is a tin sign, and it was issued again about the turn of the century, a little after, and it's got the bottle, the glass, and the opener, and I think, John, you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to see an opener, a corkscrew, associated with a beer bottle. But they had corks in them originally.
Definitely, yeah. Here's the cork on this particular one. This is a blob top bottle. This particular example is a capped bottle, and they were coexistent during a period of time there.
And around the turn of the century is when they went to caps?
Somewhere in that area, yeah. Each one, they might have even done them together at the same time for each brewery.
These were used for shooting beer.
Beer backs, basically, as we understand, they're so small you couldn't really get too messed up with them. So what they'd do is they'd drink their whiskey and drink the 4 or 5 ounces of beer as a back.
And so you'd have your shot of whiskey and then a beer chaser.
Beer chaser.
These are interesting. I know they look like stick shifts on cars.
A lot of car enthusiasts
they're
love to
actually
have them.
From taps.
They're tap dispensing knobs, and they were used again in the 30s and the 40s, and they represent the Northwest breweries that were in existence at that time.
And you did say that a lot of people would use them as stick shift knobs.
Oh, definitely. They grabbed them for that.
And what's interesting is, look around here. Tell me about these.
Well, those are foam scrapers, and they use those again pre-Prohibition as well as afterwards. They
pour the beer in and get too much of a head, right?
Too much foam, they knock it right off. But then the federal laws, I think, or state laws, one of the two, they outlawed them as far as having them because they were unsanitary.
Oh, really? So, I mean, they outlawed this thing, and
they could not use them after a point in time. They felt they were going to contaminate the next guy's beer.
It's amazing the effect that Prohibition still has on the Collectors of Today. Now, a lot of people have bars in their basements, but how many people do you know have a general store and an apothecary from turn of the century in their homes? We'll take a look at one of those when the Super Collectors returns. Stay with us. An apothecary, that is today's FX Collector Speak word of the day. And an apothecary is a drugstore or a pharmacy. And we'll see a super collection of that in just a second. But first, I want to invite you to watch Personal FX, the Collectibles Show. We do it live every day, myself and my co-host Claire Carter. That's at noon, that's Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. We see some great super collections, so make sure you check that out. Now, when you talk about apothecary memorabilia, well, you have to revisit Roz Berman. Now, she lives just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and she actually has 1,000 pieces of apothecary. She also collects general store memorabilia, which we'll see in a second. Now, J.D. was out there recently, and this warrants a second look.
This is the piece that started it all. Tell me about this.
Well, it was a sign that I saw, and I thought it was unbelievable that they would be selling whiskey for family medicinal purposes.
Do you see that? It says pure malt whiskey recommended for family medicinal purposes.
That was more than I could stand, so we had to buy it.
And that started
And that
it all.
started it.
Now look at this piece. This is a very interesting piece, and this is from...
I think that this is from about 1690.
Wow. And it's Dutch?
I think it's Dutch, yes.
Now tell us about this. If you look, it says anise.
Anise. That's the medication that was supposedly in there. But they had a thing about painting pictures on the outside.
Wow. And this is the way most medicines would come. Like you would go into the apothecary and they would have it in these jars.
Right.
Wow. That's really, really incredible. Look at this. John, you're not feeling well? Let's fix it all. Come over here, Roz, and tell us about the leeches. We can get you to bleed, if you know what I mean.
They were used for bleeding. They were very popular.
And they have a hole in the top for breathing.
So they can breathe, because they were in water, but they had to breathe. And I mean, every apothecary would have one.
Now look at this. You bought this, and a woman that you bought it from thought that it was a candle sniffer.
It was sold as a church candle snuffer.
Right. But it's actually
a hearing aid cane.
So tell us about this, Roz.
And when I got it, the wax from the church candles was still on the inside. I had to clean it all out.
Which beats a lot of earwax, right, Roz?
Right.
And this is from when?
I think this is from that same period of time, and probably handmade from the looks of it. I don't think it was a manufactured item.
Now look at this. Here is a prototype for an artificial limb. Tell us about this, Roz.
That is the patent model for an artificial leg. And
1889 is the date. F.H. Fairchild.
Right.
Wow.
And these are just copies of the original patent papers. If you find anything where you need patent papers, if you have the number, you can write to the government. I think it costs $3 or something like that, and you get copies of the patent papers.
But it's rare that you find the patent model.
No, those are very difficult to find, and when you do, they're very expensive.
Now, there's really two things to remember here. The first is that everything that you see in that apothecary collection is from the turn of the century or earlier, 1600s to 1800s. The second thing to remember, this is her home. As a matter of fact, we have a shot of the outside of the home. Let's take a look at this. There's John Davis in front of the home, and you see there it says general store. That's just outside of the house. So you can imagine what the inside of the house looks like when you talk general store memorabilia. Let's take another look.
We're still in Roz Berman's home, but we're leaving the apothecary, crossing the hall or down the street to the general store. Look at this. Can you believe the way this is set up? You have a little bit of everything in here, right, Roz?
From A to Z.
Wow. And the period for this is pre-turn of the century.
Right. I would say most is from the 1880s. Back in those days, there was no such thing as going to the mall.
Right, right.
And so whatever you wanted, again, from A to Z, you came to a general store.
That looked just like this.
They had everything.
Wow, let's look at some of these items. Tell us about this. Now, this was an interesting find for you, right, Roz?
Right. This was the first thing I ever bought at an auction out of a house.
And you thought it was wood.
I thought it was a wooden safe, and asked my husband to come with the car to take it home. Turned out it's only it's wood on the inside, but it's made of metal, weighs 600 pounds.
That is.
But I was intrigued by it because it opens with a key. There's no combination lock, and it's made in Philadelphia. And
That's
I discovered from a Philadelphia street directory that these people were in business in 1864. Whether they were before or not, I didn't take it back any further.
Wow, that's great. Now look at this. We mentioned before that she loves graphics. And tell us about this Snowboy relief.
Again, it's one of the very first things that my husband and I bought, and I just fell in love with it.
Look at this, guys.
This is a velocipede. It was a children's toy. It would be equivalent to a bicycle, but for a small child.
Mm-hmm.
And they pedaled it back and forth, and that's the steering mechanism.
That is great. Now, how old is this?
I'm guessing about 1870.
Wow. Okay, and let's quickly look at this.
All right, this is one of the ones that are not turn of the century. It's a little bit younger. It's 1907, but I fell in love with the jar. They're rather rare. You don't see these too frequently. But when I bought it, as much as I liked it, it had no lid. That's how I bought it. And it was about 2 years later, in a dealer's father's home, where he stored a lot of his things, he had the lid.
Wow. That's great that you would find the pieces in two separate places.
Unbelievable. It's a fly chaser. It works with a spring mechanism. You wound it up, and then you released the little lever, and it would slowly go around and chase the flies away so you could enjoy your dinner or would not be bothered in the store by the flies.
Right, so if you were having a picnic, you could put this on the table, wind it up, and it would keep the flies away.
Exactly.
And you're desperately searching for the key.
Right.
You don't have the key, right?
I have it somewhere, but I don't know where.
Well, Roz, thank you very much
You're most welcome.
for allowing us to step back in time to the apothecary and then your general store.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those must have been some big flies. Boy, that was something. She is some super collector. Stay with us. When the Super Collectors returns, we're going to introduce you to a man in Iowa who spent so much time at the Five and Dime that people thought he lived there. Now, the Five and Dime lives at his house. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Super Collectors. On today's show, we're talking about people that have recreated collectible businesses in their homes. And that's exactly what Dick Wolvers did out in Bettendorf, Iowa. Now, Dick, there he is right there. He actually used to go to a Five and Dime store when he was a child. And then one day he learned that the thing was closing down, and he said, this thing's coming with me. And it did, piece by piece. He recreated the whole thing in his home. JD was out in Iowa and filed this report.
We're inside Dick Wolber's recreation of the Fun Shop, which was your favorite Five and Dime. And tell us about, you're kind of an amateur architect here, right?
I try to be.
And tell us about how you created the storefront.
Well, we needed a place to put our collection anyway, and boy, I'd just been thinking about that store for years and years, and it's just popped, that'd be a great thing to do. We'll just make a recreation of it. That way we bring groups over, with kids and everything, to come over and look at it. They do just like you. Sitting inside, and they've got nose prints all over the windows.
So I wasn't the first nose print. I just want you to know that. And of course, he has it filled with fun stuff. Tell us about these Tootsie Toys.
These are primarily Tootsie Toys. It'd be the predecessor, I guess you'd say, of today's Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars. Very inexpensive in their days.
And this is a complete Tootsie Toy kit.
Yeah, that's from 1934 is when that was printed in the catalog. Probably sold for $1.39 back then.
You know what it's worth today?
Probably $600, somewhere in that range.
How many of these do you have altogether, these toys?
Tootsie Toys alone, there's probably 1,500, 2,000 of them here and there.
Now tell us about this. Tell us about the
This is a
junior police officer
yeah,
set.
this is pretty neat. It's something you could go out and patrolled the neighborhood in when you were a child.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone was guilty of erratic bicycle riding or anything like that.
And this has all the pieces,
Oh, yeah,
correct?
it's never been opened as far as I know. You give them a summons for bad bicycle riding.
Yeah, and I was wondering what the worst offense was, and you really have to put it in there yourself, so.
That's correct.
And you also collect Tom Swift books. Now tell us about these.
Well, children's literature was always very popular. I was just a voracious reader of children's literature in the Times. Tom Swift was a boy inventor, started in 1910 by the Stratmeyer Syndicate.
And this is the first one?
This is the first one, Tom Swift and his motorcycle. There's probably 40 versions of the original one and about 40 of the second version that came out in 1954 of Tom Swift Jr. This is the very last one that they printed in 1971. They had a 61-year run going with these books.
And you had a harder time finding this one than the first one,
Oh,
right?
this was almost impossible to find. I assume by the end of this, the interest was waning so badly that they didn't publish very many of them.
And there weren't that many
It
out
took me
there.
about 6 years to find this.
Wow, and how many Tom Swift books do you have?
I believe there's 82 or 83 altogether.
Wow. And of course, if you're in a five and dime, you can also buy models. Look at
Oh,
these
yes.
great old boat models. Tell us about these, Dick.
This is a kit made out of a company in Chicago called All-Star Models. They basically got a box of wood and instructions. And hopefully, if you had enough patience, you'd end up with something like that when it was completed. How many of those ever reached that state? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the question.
Probably not very many of them.
How many were completed like this? Now tell us about these, and these all came from models.
Yes, these are all built from kits. These are these kits were introduced probably in the mid-'60s, early '60s, and they're still produced today. Basically, that's what they got. There's a box of wood, instructions, and you went for it.
And this is a fancy one, this boat.
That's a model of a 1939 Chris Craft barrelback.
And I asked him, when I saw this, I said, wouldn't it be great to have a boat like this? And he said, oh, did you see it in the garage? It's upside down. So you have one like this that
Not
you're
exactly like this. I
refinishing.
do have a wood boat in the garage that's being restored right now.
Wow. And he also has a couple of items from the World's Fair, which was held not far from here in Chicago.
Yeah, these are from the 1933-1934 Chicago World's Fair, called the Century of Progress.
Look at that, the old radio flyer.
Yeah, they had a very large-scale one of those that kids would walk under when they went out to the children's play area on Enchanted Island out there. Those things. That was a real popular item. That one's the most mint example of those.
Yeah,
I've
look
ever
at that.
seen.
That is in great condition. Well, Dick, thank you very much for letting us, just kind of window shop here at your Five and Dime.
Thank you very much for coming. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Literally bought back his childhood. Just amazing. All right, questions, comments, concerns, or a super collection that you'd like to see again, contact us here at the Super Collectors, and this is how you do it. You write us a letter, Personal FX, care of the Super Collectors, P.O. Box 825, Madison Square Station, New York, New York, 10159-0825. When the Super Collectors returns, we're going to show you a family in Florida that literally lives in a collectible time warp. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Super Collectors. Been dying to show you this one all day. Now, this is a super collection out in Clearwater, Florida, and it belongs to this gentleman right here, Steve Palladino. Now, he has a collection that is actually a 1950s diner in his home. He doesn't like to pay a lot. He goes dumpster diving, but the stuff is all original. J.D. took a look, and this is what he saw.
John, it's incredible. This is their living room. Well, not their living room. It's actually their true dining room and their kitchen. And you know, this is a house that Fonzie and all of his friends would be comfortable in. It all belongs to this man and his family, Steve Palladino. How you doing, Steve?
How you doing, John?
Now, why turn your house into a diner?
I like to be different than other people, and I'm fascinated with the 50s, and I like collecting nostalgia.
This is the bad boy that started it all. Tell us about this.
This Coke machine, I was asking someone, I said, I'd like to have a Coke machine in my house. And they said, I have a Coke machine in my basement. This is the first thing I ever bought.
Now this, you didn't get for nothing.
No, this I answered an ad in the paper that someone was selling a Pepsi machine, and they said an old Pepsi machine. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but later on I found out to be one of the most sought-after Pepsi machines. It's a Jacobs 56 light-up. And I had a manager from Pepsi Cola call me from Wisconsin. He wanted to fly down and purchase it from me.
Let's move the Coke, man. Open it up.
You can see it's all original. You know, it has a little age to it. but it's quite a collectible, this one.
And you were saying that these get really damaged.
They get
Why do
damaged because of the route, man. There was nowhere for them to hold it, you know, because of the round top, similar to a 1015 Rolitzer. There was no place for them to grab it. So usually when you find one, it has all dents on it.
Wow. Now this was actually your car.
This was actually my 1959 Caddy. I had it, and I was trying to sell it. Actually, I got this for nothing. I was cleaning out a yard at a garage, and someone said, "You want this old car?" And I said, "Sure, I'll take it." And yeah, that's true. And,
Was it pink?
No, it wasn't pink.
It was a Mary Kay dealer from the 50s,
Mary Kay
right?
dealer, that's right. And I was going to sell it, and someone offered me $1,500 for it, and I didn't want it. So I figured, let me just cut the car in half, and I'll hang it on the wall.
Tell us about this, the multi-mixer.
This is a multi-mixer. I had a friend of mine who came to my house, and he told me, I got something for you. So when he came back from Chicago on his trip, he brought this to me.
Wow. And what's the value of something like this on the open?
I seen them on a 5-head like this go for about $500.
Is it rare to find them with the 5?
Well, 5s are pretty hard. You usually find a single one.
All right.
But this is a 5-head. They used them in McDonald's years ago. The gentleman also gave me this, and years ago you put powder in here, a little milk and seltzer, and you were good to go.
Wow. That is great. And again, he has a bunch of different collections. So you were into
Battery ops for a while.
battery operated toys for what? This was for a 2-month
There's a couple
collection?
months I found at garage sales, and when I find them, I usually pick new motors in them, I fix them, I repair them.
Show us this guy.
Yeah, this one's a little smoking grandpa, smokes. This little guy here flips an egg.
Look at this guy back here.
But when I get them, they don't work. So I'm pretty proud that I get them to work and stuff. This guy flips it. There we go.
And then he has this one. Where's the one? Oh, here we go.
This is a drink of Pepsi. This is good for the diner.
Watch this.
So I like these. They're real fun.
And then it comes back empty. And you had to replace the tube in there.
I
and
replaced the
everything,
tube in this one and all the other things. This thing I just picked up, a little lavender wind-up, probably from early 40s. I'm missing the little mammy on top. So if
Wow.
anyone out there has one, give me a holler.
That's his house. That's his house. He loves the 50s so much, he has 2 dogs, named one Elvis, the other one Presley. They're not hound dogs, but they'll do in a pinch. That is our show for today. Thanks so much for watching. Keep collecting, and maybe someday soon we'll see you on the Super Collectors. So long.